Welcome, everybody. I am so excited to see so many people turning out to support Sarah and me in this new venture that's been years in the making. And I'm just delighted. I'm going to take a moment to breathe in and to recognize what this has meant for us in being here for so long. I also want to start off by introducing my dear friend, Kit. Kit Miller is, I met Kit, gosh, I think it was about 18 years ago. And one of my first memories of Kit was Kit on a call. My kids are really young, playing in the background, being really noisy. And Kit looks at me with a huge amount of compassion because she was the director of the organization I wanted to work with. And she said, "Are you feeling really nervous to be on the call and to have the kids in the background? Are you wanting like acceptance to know that it's okay?" And I was like, oh my gosh, we could talk about things like that. We could be human while we're in organizations, while we're in relation. And Kit is one of the people who, from that very moment, started giving me a sense of beloved community, a sense of what it means to have all of our needs included in our daily lives, to have it held, and to be welcomed with warmth. And also, Kit is the person who models for me fiercely speaking up and fighting against injustice, fighting for a world that would actually thrive, and doing it with compassion, with the capacity to mourn, and a sense of radical inclusion. And so it was an honor for me to ask Kit to write the foreword for my book, even though she always jokes that I was her second choice. And it was an honor that she said yes, and that she said yes to hosting our first book launch call. So Kit, thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over to you.
Rox, we could spend the next 90 minutes just processing all the beauty of what you just said. So I'm going to kind of put it down with enormous appreciation. And isn't it great to be here? Isn't it wonderful? Feel free to just go bananas with your like little reaction emojis during this time together, just so we can be celebrating in all the ways that we can. It's beautiful to see so many familiar faces, and beautiful to see faces that are not yet familiar. And hooray, hooray for this day. Yeah, so very honored to be part of this special day for Roxy and for Sarah. I want to start us off also I noticed a couple of people named who are from the US named the kind of indigenous territory that they're currently resting their bones in. And I want to say also that that for my end of thing, I'm in Western New York State talking to you right now from the land of the Haudenosaunee people. And I want to do like a little exercise with you to just get all of us grounded in gratitude. And I'm doing that in part because the Haudenosaunee say that every species has a job. Every species has a job. Like the trees have a job. Thank goodness the trees do their job. They make sure we have air to breathe. Humans should have the best job, in my opinion. Our job is to be grateful and to express gratitude. Isn't that awesome? And it also happens to jive with something that Marshall Rosenberg said to me years ago when we were walking somewhere. He had some little notepad in his pocket, and I said, "What's that for?" And he said, "Whenever I have a minute stopping in a stoplight or in a line anywhere, I just jot down gratitude." And he said, and because I had just asked him, "How do you stay present through so much intensity in your life?" And he said, "This is it. This is the little notebook." So I want to invite you into that for the next minute. You can do it with a piece of paper and pen if you like, or you can just do it in your mind. So we're going to take a minute right now, and I want you to think of as many things as you would like. It's not a contest. We're not going to compare the numbers. You can write fast or slow, but for the next minute, we're just going to rejoice in the gift of being alive right now. Now, if you'd like, you can just grab something off your list that you feel inclined to share, and don't type it, but don't press send yet, because we're going to do it all together and make this like possibly like crash Zoom with the explosion of gratitude that's about to happen. So just go ahead and type. your gratitude if you choose to do that. I'll give you another 10 seconds, just something from your list. Again, it's not a contest, whatever just speaks to your heart. All right, and we're gonna press send in 3, 2, 1. Let's see some things on your list. Wow, look at all that. Oh my gosh, look at all that. So beautiful. This is about one of my favorite things to do in the world. You all just made my day. Thank you. Thank you. Mist. Oh my gosh, Joe. Friends and good weather, family, slippers, bees, woods, rocks, stones, loved ones, Roxy's contagious energy, this powerful work Sarah and Roxy are doing, people showing up, nature, remembering my first nonviolent communication IIT, seeing and hearing the ocean, beautiful trails where my dog can play in the water, a dry home and shelter from the rain, seeing dear friends, sunshine and the internet. Oh my gosh, look at all these friends and sweet love from Gwen and Roger. Oh, that Matt gets to be out golfing today, participating in beloved community, your new car, hooray. Well, I'll stop, but you're getting the impression. And isn't it great? This is our job now. Take it seriously. Enjoy your life. And it's such a great segue for me of enjoying life, because I've been enjoying the participation in this project ever since I heard about it. As somebody who's been interested in nonviolence for many years, I've also grown interested, of course, in violence. Because if you care about nonviolence, you have to care about violence. Where does violence come from? And what can we do about it? And for me, I find racism at the root of every kind of violence in this country, especially, and not just in this country, but especially here in the United States. I find it in all the systems. I find it everywhere I look. And so, and I've often kind of over the years felt frustrated of what to do, how to speak about it in a way that felt skillful, especially walking in the world with this white identity of mine. My only problem with this amazing set of work that Roxy and Sarah did was that it didn't happen 15 years ago. So we need to talk about that. Like, it really would have been great. And so today, thank goodness, finally, this resource is here for all of us. And with, you know, those of you who have spent time, especially with Roxy, you like this sort of remarkable combination of fierce vulnerability with like surgical precision in being able to name what's true for people, surgically, lovingly naming in such specific ways, such helpful ways, right? There's a few heads going up and down as I'm saying this. So, and all of that is encapsulated in this book. I'm just slack-jawed about it. I might become violent trying to make people read it as fast as that could happen. I'm gonna have to sit on myself. So that's a little bit about why I'm supporting this project. I'm so delighted you're here. We had different concerns. One of us worried that no one would come. Others were concerned that hundreds would come. So thank goodness we have just the right number of humans in the house. I want to turn the mic over to Roxy and do a little bit of reading right now about the beloved community, which is such an important concept in the world and in this book. Rox, over to you.
Thank you, Kit. So, it's such a thrill to be able to read from my book, to speak these words out loud. So I'm reading from the first chapter, which is called What's the Point? Dialogue for Beloved Community. As we learn of the elements that are essential to creating and maintaining beloved community, we may wonder if the effort is worth it. Why would we invest the time and energy, the emotional labor, to see the humanity of those who take actions that result in our harm? Why should we not see this commitment to align with beloved community as yet another burden placed on those who are less resourced that makes it easier for those with more resources? We do this because we want to change the habits of dualistic thinking, of us versus them, good versus bad, winner or loser, that have defined so many generations of human culture. We can choose to hold only ourselves and members of our community with the caring, fierce authenticity that can help our communities thrive. But each time that we treat those we deem different, bad, irredeemable in ways that ostracize and diminish them, we reinforce that value system in ourselves. The system that says some people are worth saving and some are not. As that system gets reinforced, in addition to diminishing our effectiveness, it becomes only a matter of time before something we do or something someone else does causes us to apply that system internally, not just outwardly. We see this as groups fall apart, unable to recover and stay connected to each member's worth when we discover that some folks don't share our preferred strategies, or even more quickly when they do something we don't like. We see it turned inward as people judge themselves harshly for not meeting some standard, often internalized from white supremacy culture, that they've set for themselves, lashing out, checking out, even ending their lives because they don't have the practice of meeting everyone with compassionate requests for change when things are really tough. So that's just a little bit of my thoughts about why we want to have beloved community, why it's worth it to take these actions, to take this effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Rox. When I had the opportunity to read the draft of Roxy's book, and saw some of these words, I reflected on my own experience of when I did quite a bit of the training, the Kingian nonviolence training that's out there now. And the principle about the beloved community, is like the framework for the future. And when I first heard that, I thought, okay, so it's some future state. It's just some future state that I may or may not live to see. And so it was a joyous surprise to me over the years to actually experience something quite different. That actually, I believe that beloved community is an energy that can be created when people are in relation to one another in certain ways. I experienced it numerous times in my team at the Gandhi Institute, and even later on on our board. Just so much beauty that was shared, and effectiveness. It's not sacrificing one for the other. It's both. And there's qualities that I've begun to notice that help to set the stage for that emergence to take place. So I'm curious, when you think about beloved community for yourself, have you ever been in a space where you have experienced something like this, where you've already tasted beloved community? If we've had a taste of it, we're going to be able to be better instigators of making it happen more and more. And especially with a book like Roxy's underneath our arm, we're going to be braver about being able to know how to do it. So I want to give you a minute just to think about, have you ever been in a space with folks where you've experienced beloved community? What was happening in that space? What were the elements that you think might have helped create it? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about that. And then I'll put you in pairs so you have a chance to chat about it with another human. So we're going to be quiet for 30 seconds. And here's a little prompt to help you think. If folks are on Facebook Live, we unfortunately can't put you into a little Zoom pair. So the suggestion instead, it would be for you just to do some journaling for yourself. Another way to be able to capture whatever inspiration is coming for you in this moment. Welcome back. I hope you had beautiful, brief conversations with old friends or new ones. We'd love to hear just a little, a snippet, something that felt meaningful for you in this time, the exchange that you had. No pressure, but if there's something that you'd like to share about your understanding or investigation into beloved community, we're very keen to hear it. anything that you want to say. Yeah, we want to hear it. They'll give you just another minute to put that down.
And we'd love for you to put little notes in the chat about what's really important to you, what really contributes to beloved community.
Yeah, thanks,
Absolutely.
Lisa. Yeah. Being deeply heard without judgment and really trusting that in yourself. Resonant language, remembering integrity and gratitude, attentive, open listening with no answers. Yay. Being non-judgment, being in non-judgment. Yeah. Deep trust of feeling heard. Celebrating each other and making use of each other's contributions. Isn't that just a dream come true? Yeah. Intentional belonging. Looking for and seeing beloved community rather than falling into the cultural habit of criticism. Yes, thanks for that, Fred. Yeah. And Tanya, yes, acting in alignment with beloved community helps to create it. So it's something that we maybe have more power over than we think we do. Isn't that a wonderful thought? We're just gonna we have a timetable here, and thank goodness we made it, because it's helping me from getting overexcited and doing things I'm not supposed to be doing. So I actually now have the great opportunity to do a little interview with Sarah and Roxy about this book project and what's been important for them about writing it. What was the process like? I mean, aren't you all curious about what went on between these two that generated these two beautiful books? So yeah, so I just open it up to either of you. What do you want to say?
Well, I want to say that for years, I have wanted Roxy to write at least one book, if not multiple books. And then, I mean, it was sort of like the intensity of my desire was mounting. First, it was because her work was beautiful. And then there was this very interesting pushback about privilege and whether or not privilege is an observation that happened in our larger NVC community, where I had like hours of mediated conversations with people who were saying that privilege did not actually exist, that it was a judgment, and it made people feel bad if you talked about it. It was sort of a microcosm of the pushback that we see in the United States about critical race theory. And I just became more and more. Roxy, meanwhile, was developing this beautiful body of work that had to do with racism and anti-racism. And I was like, we've got to get this book. And I would say, Roxy, we need a book. And Roxy would say, uh-huh. And finally I was like, okay, well, maybe she'll write one with me, especially now, because gosh, do we need self-compassion in these times? Both self-compassion when we bump up against the people who want to stop us talking about these things, and self-compassion just to be able to kind of negotiate day to day, being in the middle of it all. And so I said, Roxy, will you write this book with me? She had the greatest response. She was like, yes, I love that book. And I don't want to write a book with you before I write a book that's mine. Roxy, I'll let you take over now.
Yeah. And that was actually, part of these anti-racist conversations. We actually had to have one as we thought about writing the books, because I was really clear that since Sarah's already a published author with some amazing books, and she's a white woman, that if I wrote a book with her, people would see this as Sarah's book, that, I was contributing content to Sarah's work. And I wanted to be seen for what I could contribute to the world. I wanted to make sure that my voice got out there. And oh my gosh, so much self-judgment to unpack, right? Why do I want to be seen? Who am I? Why would I want to put this out there? But it was really clear to me that I needed to change kind of like the dominant narrative about who gets to speak, whose voices are heard. And so I said, I can't do this. I can't do this book until I have my own book. And then when Sarah said, okay, write 2 books, I was an idiot and I didn't realize what that would actually mean. And I said, yes. So I ended up writing 2 books in this incredibly short amount of time. And oh my gosh, it was worth it.
Yeah. we didn't expect that they would want both books at once. We were like pitching it as a progressive thing. Like Roxy would write her book, and a year later, the anti-racism and self-compassion book would come out, something like that. So when we were pitching it, we thought, oh, Roxy will have a lot of time to work on these things. But then no, the publisher wanted them together.
I think
Right.
all transformative work requires a degree of ignorance before you if you knew what you were getting yourself into, you'd be like, oh no, that's not going to happen. So yay for charging in, even with the change of the deadline, that the publisher asked for, and somehow I think probably managing to do all the things that both of you do and work on these books. Just amazing. What else
Yes,
about the process?
yeah, I think that's the other part, right? That it was really important to me. I'd never written a book. And if you read the book, especially if you read How to Have Antiracist Conversations, you'll understand why writing was so difficult for me, why I had such a huge block about it. And so, I did the hard part. We got a publisher, Barrett Cola. Thank you, Neil, who said yes to us and who was excited about our books. But then I ran into all of the fear and judgment and worry I had about putting my words on paper, putting them out there where they could be judged. And I realized that I couldn't do this without community. So we had two versions of community. The first version was actually part of that process of getting the publisher to say yes, because they were really excited about the books, but it's a business and the publishing business is really struggling right now. And they said, we want these books, but we're going to do the joint book first, the book you're writing with Sarah, because Sarah's published. Sarah has a track record. And I kept saying, that makes no sense. That's exactly the opposite of what I wanted, right? Which was to bring my voice forward. And so they said, well, if your community can show us that they want this book, we'll make it happen. And we reached out to you all, to our community, and said, would you like to pre-order this book that hasn't even been written yet? And so many of you said yes, that the publisher said, okay, there's a demand for this. And we did the Kickstarter. They said yes. They agreed to write the books. So then I had to figure out what's the strategy to deal with my internalized fears. And I brought my community together. I gathered, I think there were like 13 people, and I would give a shout out to all of them. Ranji, David, Ale, Edmundo, Alicia. Oh gosh, I guess I can't give a shout out to everyone. I'm going to put your names in the chat. They're all in the acknowledgements of the books. But they all got together, and every week they would meet with me, whoever was available, so there was no demand. And they would say, do you need empathy? Are you feeling scared? And they would support me in thinking through what's hard about this. They would say, you got this. Just talk to us about the ideas. Just tell us, what are your thoughts about beloved community? What are your thoughts about microaggressions? And I would talk to them. And in talking to them, I would relax. And then I would go and write whatever it is that I talked about, send it to them, and they would read it. They'd give me feedback. But it was all because a group of people accompanied me for the last year, saying, we're going to make sure this happens. You're not alone. And that was the biggest healing.
You were enacting beloved community while you were writing about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, so beautiful. And the vulnerability and the getting clear about what you need and advocating for yourselves, right? All of it. Yeah, that's what we need more of in this world. Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to give Sarah a chance to read something from the workbook, but anything else either of you want to have a chance to say about the process of writing itself before we switch gears?
I want to say, if you have a friend and you really want them to write a book, then be persistent. That's what I want to say. Keep thinking up new ideas.
Yeah, a big thank you from all of us, Sarah, for your persistence.
Well, that's what happened for me too. When I was writing, people said, you need a book. And I said, I can't write a book. Three of my friends got together and did the same thing with me that happened with Roxy. So it's, here we are lifting up each other's voices. It's quite something. Yeah. All right, I'll take a little read here from the Do No Harm vows. We're going to take a look at unconscious contracts. one very effective tool for moving out of self-sabotage and self-limitation into action and self-compassion is the work with unconscious contracts. These are agreements we have made with ourselves, which we often don't know about, or the causes of which we are not aware of, that keep us bound into old ways of being, thinking, and reacting, so that we stop ourselves from expression, from compassion and self-compassion, and even from fully entering our relationships. The unconscious contract that gets in most people's way when they are learning about systemic racism is the do no harm vow. It can make white folks unable to see what's happening, and it can make global majority folks unwilling to respond with fierce protectiveness. Do no harm vows are essentially undoable in our present system, so they place anyone who has any kind of power or privilege or personal power in a double bind. No one wants to do harm, but the way we live causes unavoidable harm. As white people in white supremacy culture, we harm the global majority. As humans, we harm the climate and the other species that live on this planet. If we are in the global north, we harm people with less access to resources. Instead of facing these harms, we often pretend that they do not exist, so that we can believe that we are keeping our promise to do no harm. If you have a do no harm vow, it can be hard to read this handbook, because we see our collective responsibility for the harm of systemic racism. I, Sarah, promise you, the readers, that it does get easier once we release these unlivable contracts. Once we are able to have self-compassion and acknowledge the many ways we can impact others without intending to, we can reduce the amount of harm that we perpetuate, because we can actually see what is happening. The problem with do no harm vows is not that they want to lessen harm. Indeed, Buddhism contains a number of similar life-affirming commitments. It is that the vows are too rigid and don't let us see the real and compromised system that we live within. So I'd love to be able to walk you through this so that you get a chance. And as I was saying in our meeting that we had, that some of you were at on Saturday morning, you used to think you've done this once, but you can keep doing it. You can do it every day. I mean, there's something about something about our body's protest against having to be part of a compromised system. Our bodies don't want to be part of a compromised system. And since we are part of a compromised system, our bodies don't want to know that we're part of a compromised system. So you can just look like, how today do you not want to know that you're part of a compromised system as we go through this process? Roxy, you said you had a slide for us. So one of the very sweet ways to do this for folks who are willing is to put the parts of the contract into the chat as we go. So the very first thing, you don't have to put this part in, is I, Sarah, or I, Ale, or I, Kit, solemnly swear to, and you can kind of decide here whether you're swearing to yourself, your essential self, your family line, or God, or the universe, to, and then here it is, the self-defeating behavior. This is the part we'll put in the chat. And so think for a moment, how are you making an agreement with yourself today not to know, not to see the compromised system that we live in? And so you can try out, I will do no harm, if that seems really powerful, but you can try, I will not see what's true, or I will not look. If you're in the global majority, you're not having any trouble looking. You see this everywhere. So it's not going to be an I will not look vow. It will be something different, something more perhaps like I'll not think about it, or I'll pretend it's not happening, or I'll create a little bubble in which the kind of world that I want is happening. These are the kinds of things we'll do from the position of having, if you're seeing the system very well, but needing to use old survival strategies that may be outdated to be able to survive in it. So I'll take a moment to think. Irving put one in. Thank you, Irving. I will distract myself from the truth of the system I live within. And I'll take a moment and think of what is mine today. They're beautiful that people are putting this in. Putting things in. I will divert myself, be busy, pretend everything's okay, tell myself I do see and I do advocate. I will substitute personal action for collective action. I will look elsewhere and put my attention on fixing it. I will deaden myself with guilty feelings. I will tell myself that an owl, old white lady, could not possibly be trusted or useful in this hurting city of Baltimore. I will not feel this pain. And here, this is being, we're starting to add this second step in order to not go insane. I will not risk disconnection. I will forget how embedded the system is. I will ignore the information that confronts my sense of truth. I will check out when I feel uncomfortable. And then Louisa took it one step farther. In order to do no harm, question mark, exclamation points. In order not to get overwhelmed. Okay, now. Yeah, so folks, go into your in order to's. You've got your first part in. Put your second part in order to. I will not risk losing beloved friends by speaking up with what I believe is true in order to. And Joe writes, I will think I see the horrors of this world clearly in order not to feel the impact of the reality of the real horror. That brings tears to my eyes. Yeah, in order to believe all is okay, to live each day. Roberta says all of what people are writing. In order to have connection, in order to not be overwhelmed. I will not be fully alive as a way to reject, not accept the evil that exists in the world. These little human bodies of ours, they are not meant to be isolated and atomized. We are meant to be doing this work in community. We are meant to be feeling each other's bodies so that we do not have to have these contracts. In order to keep my aliveness, in order to do what my parents seem to do, and in order to feel safe, even if it's an illusion. And then put in, no matter the cost to myself. You don't have to write it in the chat if you don't want to, but you can even just say it aloud. Say the full contract that you've made aloud. In order to bear to be alive, no matter the cost to myself. And you can put no matter the cost to myself and the world, or you can put no matter the cost to myself and the people I love. And now there's this wonderful question, because we make these contracts when we're really little. These contracts have to do with overwhelm. These contracts have to do with being a radiant baby spirit in a world full of spirits that have been dulled by trauma. There's a lot of ways that sometimes these contracts are really old. So just for a moment, step into looking at yourself as a full being, a full grown-up being who has access to Roxy's work on how to have anti-racist conversations. Take a look at yourself as a fully authorized and enabled adult person. And this may or may not be a usable concept, a possibility. And just see Is this still the contract that you need? You needed it when you were little, definitely. Do you still need it now? That's the question. And as you feel into this, you might discover that there are ways that things open for you. Like my contract was to substitute the personal for the collective action. And when I feel into that, there's something in it. My in order to is in order not to be overwhelmed. And you know, there's something in it where I say, oh, it's a contract not to grow up, not to fully grow up. And so all of a sudden there's an invitation in it. And the invitation is the blessing. You can say, if you have a sense that the contract is outdated, you get to say to yourself, I release you from this contract. I revoke this vow. I give you my blessing to, and there can be all kinds of blessings. And go ahead and put some in the chat if you're willing. Just as a last little moment. What's a blessing that you have for yourself if you're willing to let go of this contract? Blessing to claim your full power, step into authenticity without so much fear of losing everything. Fully participate. Thank you, Matthew. And feel your real community around you. Blessing to be a grown-ass human and do my best. Blessing to live in the present and find my voice, live fully. Blessing to know I won't be destroyed if people tell me I'm doing things wrong. Trust yourself to be able to hold the truth and not be overwhelmed. Sometimes these blessings require a movement into life-giving rage. Trust that I'm not alone in what I feel and long for. Blessing to become true to adult self. There may be other lovely blessings. I'm so grateful to you for walking through this with me. And now we're going to come back to Kit. Thank you very much, everyone.
Deep breath for this beautiful, beautiful work. So the next little chunk of time, should we leave the screen up or drop this?
Oh, no, I can drop it.
Yeah. So I want to take some time and hear kind of what are Roxy and Sarah's wildest dreams for this book, so that we can all put our energy into the notion of these wildest dreams on behalf of, no doubt, all life. And then we're going to take some time to hear from you, some of your questions or what wonderings about the work. And then we're going to give you all sorts of ideas of how you can be amazing ambassadors and get this work out everywhere. So that's where we're headed in the next part of our time together. Sarah, Roxy, what's your big dream? What do you want this book to do in people's lives? Individually, collectively, with whatever speaks to you.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things that come up for me when I think about how we might be transformed from reading these books. So the first piece is recognizing that we need to do our individual work, which is some of this beautiful work that Sarah just did. And we also need to change our communities. We need to change the systems that we're experiencing. And I want to help people understand how they can show up and face all of the challenging thoughts and beliefs and the places where we do harm, right? The places where I'm sitting in a lot of judgment of another person, the places where I've harmed myself because I've shut down in the face of unrelenting racism, or where I've responded with so much rage that I've destroyed the communities around me. I want to support people in being able to know how to hold themselves with self-compassion as we struggle to know how to be effective in doing this work, and then to give us the tools so that we can create positive peace. And I think that's like, if the one dream I have, the one change I would create in our society as a result of these books, is that there's positive peace. And by positive peace, I mean this kind of fierceness about saying, I'm going for peace. I'm going for a world where everyone is striving for that world of beloved community, but it's a world that's grounded in fierce authenticity, in speaking the challenging things, being willing to name it, being willing to confront harm over and over and over again, and to do it in a way that brings everyone together, that creates transformation rather than exclusion. Because a lot of what I'm seeing now is we're going for change, and I don't want to put down the change that I see people working hard for, but it's a change that's around, I'm going to build walls, I'm going to silo myself and my community from the people who are doing harm. We're not changing those people, we're just pushing them away. And so when I think of all of these walls, then people are going to keep battering to bring those walls down. And instead, I want to change hearts. I want to change minds. I want to change how we relate to each other through beloved community, through fierce advocacy that's combined with love. So that's what I want people to do. Love for ourselves, and then let that flow out into love for others, even those who do us harm, so that we can transform what's happening.
Oh, so cool, Roxy. One of the things I was noticing at the point where I was asking Roxy to do the self-compassion and anti-racism book with me, so I was noticing how exhausted I was seeing people get around me, that I was seeing folks from the global majority getting really exhausted with everything that was going on. And I was seeing folks who had traditionally considered themselves to be advocates getting really exhausted from the growth of knowledge and understanding about how language creates sort of our language is permeated by white supremacy and the ways in which whiteness is unconsciously centered. And then the calling in, as Roxy so beautifully puts it, that people were having a hard time even surviving the calling in process. And that in a part that was what the protest was in the NVC community. It was like this idea that if we didn't have the conversation, nobody would get tired. And I was like, no, I really think there's a different way. And the different way is with self-compassion and knowledge of interpersonal and relational neurobiology, and also with Roxy's beautiful crystalline clarity and structure. So my most desired, deepest hope is that these books reach in and hold people's hearts and say, oh, sweetheart, I acknowledge your exhaustion, and there's a way to keep going joyfully.
Did everybody just enjoy feeling their heart cupped? Anything else either of you would like to say about this book in terms of a dream for it?
Yeah. There's another piece around, like, in How to Have Antiracist Conversations, I do the very briefest discussion about kind of like the history of white supremacy, about unconscious bias. And we've been getting a lot of interest from people who are saying, how do I talk about this to my kids? How do I talk about this with the next generation? And that's also part of my dream. Like, I have children, and one of the things I've learned and I witness in my children is that they are so much better equipped already to have these conversations. They already are like living lives that are about building an inclusion, about really radically welcoming everyone in ways that I still struggle with. And so I want to see us raising the next generation of people equipped with these tools so that every generation it's a little bit easier. Every generation has to struggle a little bit less until we finally get, maybe 7 generations from now, we get to that place where, when somebody said, why are you calling this book How to Have Antiracist Conversations? Like they were saying this was a problem, like anti-racism presumes racism exists, presumes race exists. And I want to see us take the work of this book, feed it into every generation so that the title makes no sense 7 generations from now. That people are like, what is racism? What's anti-racism? That it's just such a foreign concept. So take this and don't just think about it as something that you're going to do out in the world, the systems you're going to change. Think about, what are you doing in your families? What are you doing in your house? How are you supporting your children into really embodying, living, understanding this cellular level?
Children, grandchildren, young friends. I thought about when you were talking about contracts, Sarah, one of the contracts I have sometimes is to just sort of try to somehow protect the younger people in my life from what I see is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that doesn't work, And if anything, it leaves them kind of feeling lonely and me lonely on this other side of the wall from each other. So there's something so beautiful about really bringing this work in to all the relationships that we have.
Yeah.
Irvine's lucky. He says, my daughter continually teaches me about anti-racism. Hooray. Hooray.
Mm.
Anything else you want to say about the book before we open it up to these lovely people and the questions that they would like to ask you?
I love questions. I'm excited to hear the questions and feedback.
Great. Anything else from you, Sarah?
No, it'd be lovely to go to questions if folks have any for us. We would love them.
Cool. So I think the request is that people put questions in the chat, yeah?
Oh, into the Q&A.
Mhm. So they might need to either, if they see the Q&A button at the bottom of their Zoom menu, you can click that, or you can click more, and then you can find the Q&A option under more. And you can choose to make it anonymous or not anonymous. And I see that Ayanna has asked in the chat, like, say again, the goals for the book. I'd say like the biggest goal is to transform our world, to help empower people to do the healing work that they need to do, to show up for these conversations, to show up and demand change, fiercely demand it, and to have that change come from both themselves, their families, their communities, that it's just flowing outwards.
And not leaving anybody behind is what I'm hearing.
Yes, thank you for naming that.
Yeah. Yeah, the minute that we start making those deals with ourselves, we start to lose. Yeah. Yes. Thank you. So let's see some questions in the Q&A. Thank you, Tanya. Sarah, Roxy, I think you both can see these questions too. Yeah. What's the relationship with the Elsa Harrington book?
Yeah.
Heart, she says it's not authorized by the author. Not sure.
Yeah, I've actually not heard of that book, so there's no relationship. I think it might be like one of those beautiful synchronicities where people think of the same beautiful language to describe something. But thanks for naming that. I'm going to go check out that book. Other questions that folks might have. And if anybody wants to unmute and ask a question, you're also welcome to do that.
Here's a question from Louisa. She says, I've been convicted by the recent work of Shelley Tolchuk, calling out how many anti-racist activists have shamed other white people by insisting they admit they're racist. Guilty as charged, and seeing how your work can help. Can you speak about how to address this?
Yeah, I think part of it is really understanding why there's this insistence in demanding that other people say that they're racist, right? What is it that the person who's making that demand is trying to accomplish? And I think that part of it is this kind of helplessness and hopelessness that when we keep watching people deny the ways that they have impacted other people, deny the ways that they've benefited from the systems of white supremacy and racism and privilege that exist, that there's this fierceness around trying to wake people up and get them to see it. And part of the challenge is that it doesn't actually help. The more that we shame people, and especially people who are maybe adopting these views because they're trying to find their path, however challenging, but they're trying to find their path to belonging, their sense of community. So the more we shame them, the more they realize, oh, then you're not my community. So I'm going to kind of double down and keep with the white supremacists who are saying, yeah, come on over here. We believe in what you believe. So it actually serves to drive people away further. So if I want to really support and get those folks who are having these racist impacts to recognize what's happening, especially those of you who are on the call who are white, go empathize with them. Let them know that you see them. Let them know that you understand them, and then call them in about changing their actions, not about demonizing them, not about telling them that they're bad, but letting them know, I see your heart, and I see that you actually want to be a being of love. And here's how you can do that. Show them what's different rather than going to shame.
Thank you. If you disagree with a person's goal, how do you incorporate that into beloved community?
This is such a wonderful question, because it's sort of the essence of why beloved community is so effing hard. It's really kind of easy to have a beloved community with everybody that we agree with and that we love and whose work in the world we honor and respect. It's like, oh yeah, this feels good. I'm in my beloved community. But then if we expand it to the folks who are not feeling about the world the way that we feel about the world, who do not have the same goals that we have, how the heck do we expansively open and welcome and respect those people? The most important thing, and this is from Kazu Haga's beautiful book, Healing Resistance, is to separate the action the person is doing from the person themselves. And it, I think, takes a little oomph from spirit or nature or whatever you believe in that's bigger than humans. Because boy, do I get pissed off at my fellow humans who have different goals than I want them to have. I get really pissed off at oil executives who want their bonuses rather than taking a look at fossil fuel consumption and trying to figure out how to change the world. So, so if I can peel off that desire for a bonus from the soul of the person, I'm getting closer to beloved community. But I need a lot of resonance and support and contract work to be able to get there. I wonder if that was helpful for that person. They can let us know. Roxy, do you have anything to add right there?
Yeah, because I love this question, especially when we're talking about racism, right? Because some of the goals that people espouse are not goals that I want at all, right? Like someone who's saying, yeah, I just want to kill all Black folks. It's like, no, especially when we think about what just happened in Jacksonville. So I want to also be clear, and it's part of what I talk about in the books, that beloved community does not mean that I have to accept your goal, especially when it's a goal that's about harm to me and the folks that I love, harm to my community, right? And so if I want to incorporate that person into beloved community without their goal, it's exactly what Sarah's saying. I can say what you're doing is not okay with me, absolutely not okay, and I am going to fight against it. I'm going to resist it, and I can do that without demonizing you, without saying you're an evil person, with mourning the tragic, gosh, when I think about that person who killed folks this week, I'm thinking about the tragic horror of any human being, the disconnection with the fundamental essence of what it means to be human that would lead another person to do this. And there's grief for me that any of us, whoever we are, can take those actions. And I can hold that grief simultaneously with saying, and those actions are absolutely not okay and need to be stopped in any way possible. So it's being able to hold the both. That part of beloved community is this fierce resistance to these actions that are causing harms while still grieving and mourning the folks who are taking those actions.
It's like the difference between waking up and wanting to cut Florida off and push it into the ocean and going, oh my goodness, loving the people and really having a fierce resistance to what the kind of laws that they're enacting.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think you've both already begun to, in what you just said in the last few minutes, to respond to Louise's question here is, can you say a bit more about not leaving anyone behind? If there's no, we could talk all day long about what that is and why it matters. Just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, and this is something I talked about it and a reference in the reading that I shared earlier. This piece about not leaving anyone else behind, another piece that we haven't yet touched on is leaving ourselves behind. And I think this is part of the work that Sarah does, right? That it's so easy once we've internalized some of these ideas of good, bad, savable, not savable, to see ourselves as irredeemable, to notice like when I take an action that's caused harm to another person, my only option is to eject myself, to leave myself behind, to say that I am now no longer savable, worthy. So how do we practice that for ourselves? How do we hold ourselves with grace and compassion? And because this is beloved community, also a fierce commitment to doing better, to noticing, why did I do this thing that I did? What were the needs I was trying to meet? What was driving me? And how can I find a different, less costly way? So it's both not leaving anyone else outside of us behind, but also not leaving ourselves behind.
And there's something I think that Roxy really stands for that I've learned a lot from her about, which is the difference between negative and positive peace. That there's a way we can leave people behind when we say, so, and we walk away, you know. And there's something to be said for speaking up for what's really true for us, instead of just saying and walking away, saying, gosh, your expression, I find your expression really painful. And I'm saying this because I care about you, and I care about being able to show up with you in an authentic and true way. So that's something else for me about not leaving anybody behind.
Be able to express the complexity of the truth of the moment in a way.
Yeah. And one of the other things that Roxy often talks about is, choosing our moments. Who do we really, where does our life energy take us? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not our job to do everything. That we get to do what's ours and do what we're called to do.
Thanks, Louisa, for in the chat, gifted by hope by focusing on doable actions and requests and not these labels that may now be getting in the way. Yeah. They certainly do get in the way, and they show up faster than a speeding bullet sometimes, how quickly they're there waiting to separate us from one another. Yeah. Got a couple more minutes. If anyone has got something they want to say, you can unmute or put your question in the chat. Got just a few more minutes with these two amazing humans on a big, big, big day in their lives.
There's a question in the chat, and there's a question in the Q&A about somebody whose friend had published, was trying to publish a poem that, and this friend actually works for the police department, helping young folks not return to the system, not get incarcerated. But because they work for the police department, their poem was rejected by a zine that was about publishing things about resistance and vision. And so the question was, are there any thoughts about the canceling of this guy's poem because of who they work for? And the idea that publishing a poem by someone who's working for the police would cause harm. And this is a really challenging question, because I can hold both, right? This is, again, this idea of both understanding why the editors of the zine might say we want to be really clear in our vision about what it is we're supporting and the kind of messages that we want to give, and even in some ways maybe leverage a little bit of pressure to say, if you are working for the police departments, for the oil companies, for these institutions that are causing harm, we want to invite you to really reflect on, are you doing something that's actually aligned with this other vision that you have? Is the fact that you're working for the police department in this way that's supportive, that aligns with our vision, but still for this institution that's causing harm, is that okay? Is that truly okay? And so I could see that the zine was trying to maybe inspire that kind of reflection and consideration in the person. And I can also see the grief in the mourning about the person who so wants um, any step, any action that can help save young folks to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be supported. And so for me, it's not about saying, was there a right or wrong answer in this moment? It's really around acknowledging the dilemma, the pain, both what's cost, the loss, what the cost is for each of the decisions, either way that we go, and what the needs are that each person's trying to meet.
Mm.
So I would say just be with your friend and hold space for their grief, their sadness, their rage about not being seen for what they're doing.
And that you yourself may need support even before you can do that. If, whenever we have a sense that somebody's wrong, then it's just a sign that it would be nice to have a little emotional support. Yeah. Obviously there are things we don't want to have happen and we want to have fierce conversations about. So that's another option, is getting empathy and having a conversation with the publisher. So, there's all kinds of ways to begin to advocate and take action, and there's not a wrong way.
As we're here having these conversations, I'm thinking about something I'm so excited that both of you are getting up to right now, and as part of this launch, which is that you've been doing some podcasts, and I wonder if you'd be willing to speak for a couple of minutes about some of the people that you've been talking to and how people can access those podcasts, because I'm super excited about who you're talking to.
Huh. This podcast, I was so excited about this podcast series. Roxy and I put this together to lift up people who are doing anti-racism in all kinds of ways. Because sometimes we think that to be an anti-racist, we need to become an elected official, or we need to be out there marching with Black Lives Matter signs, or we need to be being water sprayed by the police. Or, there's like, we have certain standards within ourselves that might not actually reflect the whole panoply, the entire sort of range of possibilities for anti-racism. So we were like, what are people doing in the world that's anti-racist? And we've had Shakti Butler, who makes documentary films, and we had Shaquille Chowdhury, who does DEI stuff up in Canada, and we had Raj Kumari Niyogi, who does anti-racism and thinks about belonging and inclusion in corporations, especially in Silicon Valley. And then we had Philip Miller, who's a South African composer, whose latest work is a work bringing forward the anti-AIDS activist Simon Coley. He's made a Vogue opera about Simon and Coley. So there are so many ways to be anti-racist, and this is what we're hoping that to bring people inspiration and enjoyment. Roxy, what do you want to say?
I'm loving the one in the chat. Maybe do one with Kit Miller too. I've mentioned it to Kit, so
Now that she's been with us,
yeah.
maybe she'll do it.
Mhm. And I also just want to also name, like, what I also love about the podcast is that sometimes it gets really edgy. So we had this great conversation with Edwin Cleophas, who is a Black South African who is speaking up against the Truth and Reconciliation process and talking to us about why he thought that actually didn't support the folks there. We had a really great conversation, and I could never say his last name. Sarah, say his last name.
Oh, a Komalafe.
Yes, who is really like pushing back against the idea of, like forming these identity-based ways of doing social activism, right? So things that are really about helping us question not just how we show up to do the work, but also some of even the philosophies and the ways we think about what's effective and not effective. So it's been really mind-opening for me to do this podcast, and can't wait for y'all to listen to them. If you go to our website, antiracistconversations.com, you can click on the podcast tab, and then you'll see the 4 podcasts that are already posted. And then just keep a watch out every 2 weeks. Well, there'll be one next week because we were off a week because our editor got COVID. But so there'll be one this week, one next week, and then every 2 weeks, you'll get a new one to listen to.
Yeah, and lots more great people I've heard as possible people to interview. And if any of you have an idea of it, these two would be open to hearing who else should they be talking to. Make the audience for this work as big as it possibly can be.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So this is we're going to turn our attention now to all the ways that all of us can help make sure that the world that we are so hungry for can come about more quickly, in part because of your efforts. These 2 humans have made huge efforts. So now our chance to have a little bit of fun, leveraging their impact, leveraging those voices. So here are some thoughts, some places to buy the books if you haven't already purchased them. Black-owned bookstores is an especially powerful strategy. Leaving review, online stores or Goodreads, if you've received and read your books, posting photos on social media, starting a book club with friends. That's one of my favorite strategies. I love book clubs. And sharing stories with friends on social media. What are some other ideas? Because I bet there's more ideas even. What are some other ideas that any of you might have about ways that we could leverage this effort?
And one of the things, while people are thinking about different things to do, that we'd love to invite right now is for you to go to Goodreads. If you've started working with the books and you have any idea what you'd like to say, and to leave a review, like right now. We have links for you even that we can give you to be able to go and leave a review. And the reason this is so important is because there are actual people who are trolling for books on anti-racism and giving them 0 stars or 1 star without even saying anything about it. It's not like they've read the book and don't like it. They don't like it because it's about anti-racism. So we need the support. So we've got a little link in there for the Goodreads. So if you have, even just right now, while you're listening to the end of this podcast or this book launch celebration, go and say something. Only if it's authentic. Say something wonderful about us. Give us good stars.
Yes, please do that. Yeah, and you could just say the authors made me write something good about their book on this site. So that's yes. Some other great ideas in the chat. Thank you so much. Yeah, giving the books, of course, as gifts to friends and family. That's one of my favorites. Requesting the books from your library. yes, let's get the libraries everywhere
Mm.
engaged with ordering these books. Send some complimentary copies to progressives in government. So many people who are working, and maybe not just progressives. I've actually been reading quite a few articles about people who are very keen to dialogue, who we wouldn't even call progressive. Send it to people that you don't assume is progressive. You don't know what's going to happen to it. What other ideas? Giving
We
them
just had a woman buy a bulk, place a bulk order for books to give to jails and libraries in her own municipality.
yes, yes, yeah.
And I also have been making an offer to people who are joining these book launch calls. If you start a book club and you let me know about it, I will do a Q&A for your book club. So start a book club, send me a message, and we will figure out when I can do a Q&A for your book club. So hope you take me up on this.
Hmm.
Ah,
So savoring this time and the connection and all the energy and these beautiful faces with us. This more ideas of buying in bulk. Yes, thank you, Tanya. Yeah. Anything else either of you feels moved to say before we send these good people off into the rest of their day after they stop at the Goodreads website and say something? I'll be
well,
pushing on behalf of Roxy and Sarah. You don't mind, do you?
well, I do want to say that for all of you who came this morning, if you are free this afternoon, come to the afternoon book launch party with Shakti Butler, because it's going to be amazing also. And I know Shakti has some beautiful kind of conocimiento kind of exercises that will help us get to know each other, get to know ourselves. So I invite you to join us again. Come celebrate twice with us.
Yes, and for those of you who are wondering how we can continue this conversation, sign up on the sign up for the podcast. Go to the Antiracist Conversations website. There are classes that Roxy and I are doing. Go to the roxannemanning.com website. There are classes that Roxy continually offers. These are the very best ways to continue the conversation there, to get into the classes.
And there was also a question about how to get a bulk rate discount. I've just put into the chat a link directly to the publisher, and your best discount right now is to buy the books as a bundle, so both books together, and then there's also an additional discount depending on how many copies you purchase. So if you look at that link, it tells you about their bulk buyer program, and more than 10 copies gets free shipping, so that's a really great way to get a pretty good discount on the books.
And before we wrap up today, just each one of you that are here today, please just stop and appreciate yourself for choosing to make this time. It really matters that you are here today. It's just, we need to support each other. We heard from Roxy how powerful community is. We heard from Sarah that was in relationship, that this whole thing has happened because we get brave and we speak the truth to each other. We ask each other for what we need. And so you're being here and amplifying this, just, it matters so much. So each of you being here today, we're just so grateful. And yes, as Roxy said, come back later and hang out with Shakti, and yeah, keep in touch, please.
Thank you very much, everyone. And just this last note for anyone in other countries, see if you can find a publisher who wants to buy the international rights. And if you want to translate, advocate for that, because this stuff is it's so sweet to get it out into the world.
If you've been on this call, especially on the Zoom call, it means that you registered for the book launch. We'll be sending out an email after the book launch with a link to the recordings for all the book launch events. So that's the best way to come back and listen to the recordings, or check our website probably next week, maybe the week after.
And if you'd like to say goodbye to us, and so much gratitude to you, Kit. What a pleasure to have you with us. This really gave me such a kind of bubble of delight in my chest as we were going through the morning here. If you'd like to come off mute and say goodbye to the three of us, we'd love to hear your voices.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank you
Laura.
so much.
Yes.
Thanks.
Laura,
Thank you
I
guys
love
so
you.
much.
Fantastic trio.
Thank you.
Bye bye.